Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the 16th BRICS Summit has just ended, successfully concluded. It was the culmination of the Russian presidency of the association and one of the notable events in the global political calendar. I have repeatedly said that Russia approaches the duties of the BRICS chairman responsibly. More than 200 events were held in 13 Russian cities. In particular, numerous meetings of industry ministers, various conferences, seminars, and a business forum were held. Sports games were also held with great success. This year, we have already worked in an updated, expanded composition, and Russia, as the chairman of the association, did everything possible to ensure that new members of the organization joined our family as quickly and organically as possible. And this, in my opinion, we have succeeded. The new participants saw and understood that it is possible to work and achieve results in BRICS. They felt that in our association there is, most importantly, mutual respect and mandatory consideration of each other's interests. I can state with satisfaction that all of them take an active part in working forums, put forward useful, promising ideas and initiatives. As for the Kazan Summit itself, delegations of 35 states and 6 international organizations took part in it, as you already know. Such broad representativeness clearly demonstrates the authority and role of the BRICS, the growing interest in interacting with us, on the part of states that actually pursue a truly independent sovereign policy. Each of these states has its own path of development, its own models of economic growth, rich history and culture. It is precisely in this civilizational diversity, a unique combination of national traditions, that the strength and huge potential for cooperation lies, not only within the framework of BRICS, but also in that large circle of like-minded countries that share the goals and principles of the association's activities. The summit program was very rich. Meetings of the BRICS member states were held in a narrow, broad format, focused on topical issues of the association's activities, and prospects for expanding partnership in 3 main areas in the field of politics and security, trade and investment, and on the cultural and humanitarian track. According to tradition, a meeting was held in the format of Autistic BRICS Plus. This format has proven itself well and already provides an opportunity for a direct and open dialogue between the members of the association with our friends and partners from among the states of the Global South and East. This year, the Russian presidency invited the leaders of the CIS countries, as well as delegations from many Asian, African, and Latin American countries, as well as the heads of executive bodies of a number of international organizations, to such a meeting. We exchanged views on key international issues with an emphasis on the escalated situation in the Middle East. We also considered the prospects for cooperation between the BRICS members and the countries of the Global South and East, of inclusive sustainable development. The main thing is that all the meetings and events that I have just mentioned, without exception, were held in the traditional BRICS business and open manner in an atmosphere of mutual understanding. This constructive approach to working together allowed us to discuss a wide range of issues in detail for 3 days. The BRICS Kazan Declaration was approved at the summit, summarizing the discussions that took place. In our opinion, it turned out to be a comprehensive conceptual document with a positive agenda looking to the future. It is important that it confirms the commitment of all our states to building a more democratic, inclusive, and multipolar world order based on international law and the UN Charter. There is a common determination to counteract the practice of applying illegitimate sanctions and attempts to undermine traditional moral values. The BRICS state is determined to deepen partnership in the financial sphere. We will continue to consolidate interbank communication and create mechanisms for mutual settlements in national currencies that are independent of external risks. I would also like to note that during the summit, my colleagues and I discussed in detail possible joint efforts to further stimulate investment for further economic growth in the BRICS state and the country of the Global South and East. We will do this, including with the help of the new Development Bank and its president, Mrs. Dilma. Russia has offered to extend the chairmanship of both its president and the president of the Bank of Brazil, Ms. Rousseff. Bearing in mind that this year Brazil is chairing the G20, next year they are taking the baton from us and will lead the BRICS. And I will not hide it, based on the fact that we know what kind of situation is developing around Russia, and we do not want to transfer all the problems associated with this to institutions in the development of which we ourselves are interested. We will cope with our problems, and we will cope ourselves. There are good prospects for strengthening industry cooperation, implementing new projects in industry, energy, logistics, high technology, and many other key areas. And, of course, to intensify cooperation between our countries in culture, science, sports, through youth and civil societies. In Kazan, we confirmed that BRICS is not a closed format in itself. It is open to those who share the values of BRICS, and its members are ready to work on finding joint solutions without outside dictates or attempts to impose only some narrow approaches on anyone. BRICS cannot but respond to the growing demand in the world for such cooperation. Accordingly, we paid special attention to the problems of possible expansion of the BRICS through the establishment of a new category of partner states. These days, the leaders and members of the delegation communicated a lot in an informal setting. A lot of bilateral meetings, contacts, conversations were held. We also tried to meet, our delegation, with the leaders of most of the participating countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the summit is over. I would like to thank all the colleagues who came to Kazan once again for their contribution to our common work. And I want to point out that, I think, he was very weighty. Throughout the presidency, we feel the energetic support of our partners. This is important, especially since it does not end with the conclusion of the summit. There are a number of important joint events to be held before the end of the year. As I have already said, we are passing the baton of Brazil's presidency next year. Naturally, we will provide our Brazilian friends with all the necessary assistance. We will continue close coordination with all BRICS partners in the interests of further enhancing cooperation within the framework of this association. And, of course, taking this opportunity, I would like to sincerely thank the leadership of Tatarstan, the mayor's office of Kazan, for their hospitality and their desire to create comfortable conditions for our joint work. I want to apologize to the residents of Kazan for the fact that they had to face some of the convenience of moving motorcades and closing some highways there, I understand. But I want to assure you that these trials were not in vain. I want to thank you for creating such favorable conditions for our work. Thank you very much. I want to apologize in advance, but we cannot communicate with you for a long time, answering your questions, because I have several more bilateral meetings, in my opinion, 7 there or something like that. So I can't keep my colleagues waiting. But, nevertheless, if there are any questions, I ask you. Let's do it quickly, questions. Let's take the first channel of Russian television. Here we go. Anton Vernitsky, Channel 1. Mr. President, please tell us in more detail about the financial cooperation of the BRICS countries. Has a common investment platform been discussed, and has the creation of an alternative payment system been discussed? Was there any talk of an alternative to SWIFT? Thank you. So, as for SWIFT and any alternatives, we are not creating any alternatives to anyone. But nevertheless, the question is very important today. One of the key problems is the problem of calculations. And that is why we are following the path of using national currencies. It is well known. As for settlement systems, we use the already established Russian Financial Information Exchange System, created by the Central Bank of Russia. Other BRICS member countries also have their own systems. We will use them too, we are already using them, and we will develop this interaction. But we are not inventing any separate general system yet. What there is, in principle, is enough. It is only necessary to make appropriate decisions at the administrative level in a timely manner. We have also discussed this with our colleagues, and we will follow this path. Let's move on. Let's have this sector here, the second row, please, here, yes. Imagine that. Hello, RIA Novosti Ilya Yezov. Vladimir Vladimirovich, the forum in Kazan was the first summit for the BRICS, not as for the 5 countries, but as for unification with a wider geography. And at the same time, talks about possible expansion continue, and your colleagues, including today, have repeatedly stated that they are ready to work more closely with BRICS. And the format of the BRICS partner country was also being worked out. In this regard, could you please share how the work is going in this direction? What was the main signal given by the Kazan summit on the further expansion of BRICS? Thank you. Indeed, as I have already said, many countries are showing interest in working in this association. 35 countries participated in the events in Kazan. And we agreed with our partners that at the first stage, with a possible expansion in mind, we will follow the path of agreeing on a list of partner countries. Such a list has been agreed upon. Some of the countries that participated in these events, in today's and yesterday's events, have sent us their proposals and a request for full-scale participation in the work of the BRICS Association. Then the situation will develop as follows. We will send an invitation and an offer to the countries and future partner countries to participate in our work in this capacity. And upon receiving a positive response, we will announce who is on this list. It would simply be incorrect to do this now before we get a response. Although all of these countries, they practically addressed requests at one time. Thank you. Let's move on. The next sector there is further away. I see the second row of news, too, in my opinion, right? Come on. Good evening. Viktor Sinyavek, Izvestia Ms. It is known that during your numerous bilateral meetings, the topic of the conflict in Ukraine was raised. Tell me, in what way did you discuss what is happening in this foe zone? How about your partner, with whom we talked? How are we disposed towards this conflict, and did we talk about supporting our country? Well, everyone is determined that the conflict ends as soon as possible, and preferably by peaceful means. You know that the People's Republic of China and Brazil took the initiative during the assembly in New York. At the General Assembly in New York, many BRICS member countries support these initiatives, and we, in turn, are grateful to our partners for paying attention to this conflict and looking for ways to resolve it. Let's move on. I see, here we have our guests from the USA. NBC, please. This is the same sector farthest from us. Give me the microphone, please. Thank you. Mr. President, Kerr Simons, NBC News. Mr. President, satellite images indicate that North Korean troops are in Russia. What are they doing here? And isn't this a serious escalation of the war in Ukraine? Mr. President, There are also a few weeks left before the US elections. Russia is again accused of interference. To say that you had private conversations with former President Trump. Did you have conversations with him, and what did you talk about? Us. Well, let's start with the first part of your question. Pictures are serious things. If there are pictures, it means that they reflect something. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that it was not Russia's actions that led to an escalation in Ukraine, but the coup of 2000 of the 14th year, supported primarily by the United States. It was even publicly announced how much money the then US administration spent on the preparation and organization of this coup. Isn't that the way to escalate? And then, we were deceived for 8 years when they said that everyone wanted to resolve the conflict in Ukraine by peaceful means, through the Minsk agreements. Later, and you probably heard it too, a number of European leaders directly said that they were deceiving us, because they used this time to arm the Ukrainian army. Isn't that right? That's right. Now, a further step of escalation was that Western countries began to actively arm the Kiev regime. What has it come to? Before the direct participation of military personnel of the armies of NATO countries in this conflict, because we know what is being done, and how to launch unmanned naval vehicles in the Black Sea, we know who is present there, from which European NATO countries, and how they carry out this work. The same applies to instructors, military personnel, not mercenaries, but military personnel. The same applies to the use of high-precision modern weapons, including missiles such as ATACMS, Storm Shadow, and so on. Ukrainian servicemen cannot do this without space reconnaissance, target designations, and Western-made software, and only with the direct participation of NATO officers. As for our relations with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, as you know, today, in my opinion, our strategic partnership agreement has just been ratified. There is Article 4 there. And we have never doubted in the least that the North Korean leadership takes our agreements seriously. But what and how we will do is our business within the framework of this article. First, it is necessary to conduct appropriate negotiations on the implementation of this Article 4 of this treaty. But we are in contact with our North Korean friends, and we will see how this process develops. In any case, the Russian army is acting confidently in all directions. It is also well known. No one denies this. It is moving forward on all sections of the line of contact. It is also actively working in the Kursk direction. Part of the units of the Ukrainian army invaded the Kursk region, blocked, surrounded. This is about 2,000 people. Attempts are being made to unblock this group from the outside, to break through from the inside, so far unsuccessfully. The Russian army has begun to eliminate this group. As for contacts with Mr. Trump. But this is a thing that has been constantly exaggerated for not a single year. Once we were accused of that, and Trump himself of being somehow connected with Russia. Then, as a result of an investigation in the United States itself, everyone came to the conclusion, including in Congress, in my opinion, that this is complete nonsense, that nothing like this has ever happened. It didn't happen before, it doesn't exist now. And how Russian-American relations will be built after the elections depends primarily on the United States. If the United States is open to building normal relations with Russia, then we will do the same. If they don't want to, don't. But this is a choice for the future of the administration. Pavel Zarubin here. It is impossible not to give. Good evening. Pavel Zarubin, Russia TV channel. In continuation of the topic of conversations with Trump, the former US president, now a candidate for the US president, also stated that in one of the telephone conversations with you, he allegedly threatened you with a strike on the center of Moscow. Is it true, and in general, is it possible to threaten you? Does the threat affect you? And how do you feel about the fact that in general, in big politics, now even the conversations of leaders are spilling out into the public space more and more often, if this story is true? And one more question, if possible, about the BRICS summit. Do you feel isolated now, and do you miss, perhaps, communicating with your Western colleagues? Thank you very much. The first part, is it possible to threaten? But you can threaten anyone. It is pointless to threaten Russia because it only cheers us up. But I don't recall such a conversation with Mr. Trump. Now is a very acute phase of the election campaign in the United States. And I suggest not to take such statements seriously. But here's what Mr. Trump said just recently, and what I heard him say about the desire to do everything to end the conflict in Ukraine. It seems to me that he says this sincerely. And a statement of this kind, from whomever they come, we certainly welcome. Yes. What's that? Isolated. You know, we receive various signals from our Western partners about possible contacts. We have not closed ourselves off from these contacts. And when we hear that we refuse, I refuse to have such conversations, contacts, including with European leaders. I want to tell you that this is a lie. We have not refused, and have never refused, and we are not refusing now. If someone wants to resume relations with us, please, we talk about it all the time. But we don't impose. As you can see, we live normally, work, develop, our economy is growing. Last year, how many did we have? 3 and 4, 3 and 6%. This year, there will be about 4, 3 and 9, maybe there will be. Economy. The Eurozone economy is teetering on the brink of recession. There is, however, growth in the States. It will be a little over 3, in my opinion, somewhere 3, 1, 3 and 2, probably, %. It's not bad really. But still, there are enough problems there too. And there is such a deficit in 3 important areas: the foreign trade deficit, the balance of payments deficit, and the huge debt. 34 trillion, I think. We also have a problem, but it's better for us not to argue with each other, not to conflict, but to think about how to solve these issues together. This is exactly what we are doing within the framework of BRICS. Let's ask a couple more questions, and we will finish here. Let's take this sector, our guests from Africa, here I see. Give me the microphone, please. The middle of this sector is the 2nd century. Thank you very much. Do we have French? Yes, a translation. There is. Okay. My name is Saiken Dermal, a journalist from Cameroon. Mr. President, our team has just returned from Donbass. And we are currently preparing a documentary film in order to show the reality in the Donbass, to tell what this means for Africa. We know, Mr. President, that many African countries are now victims of terrorism and other actions aimed at destabilizing African states. And at the same time, we see that Russia is helping in the car in other Sol countries. And before that, other countries were present there. And only after the arrival of Russia, it was possible to achieve stabilization of the situation in many of these countries. So the question is this: isn't it time for Russia to deepen this kind of partnership, not only in the military field, but also to develop relations in other areas with African states? Thank you. Yes, I totally agree with you. This is the meaning of our work with the strange BRICS partners. We believe that the creation of an investment platform within the framework of the BRICS. This is the meaning of our work. We believe that in the near future, I have just spoken with colleagues at the final stage of today's summit. I have just said that, according to our experts, the economies of countries such as Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and some others will develop at a good progressive pace. The development will be positive. But there are regions of the world in which, in our opinion, development will go very fast. These are primarily the countries of South Asia and Africa. And that's exactly why we have now raised the issue of creating a new investment platform within the framework of BRICS, using modern electronic tools in order to create such a system that could be, and this, oddly enough, can be achieved without inflation and create conditions for investment in efficiently, rapidly developing markets in these regions. The world, including and above all in Africa. Why do we think that? I believe that many will agree with me. There are several reasons for this. First, there is a large growth and rapid population growth in these countries. And in Africa, I spoke with the Prime Minister of India yesterday. There are 10 million people there every year. Plus 10 million. Every year, this is an increase in India's population. And it is growing rapidly in Africa. Secondly, there is still a small level of urbanization in these regions of the world, but it will definitely increase completely. And people will be from the country. They will strive to catch up with the standard of living in these countries at a faster pace compared to, say, other regions of the world, including Europe. All this and a number of other factors indicate that the growth rate, yes, and capital accumulation will occur. And it is already happening. All this suggests that special attention should be paid to these regions of the world. So my colleagues and I are agreeing and are now trying to create a working group on the basis of the new BRICS Development Bank in order to create mechanisms for effective, reliable investment in these countries. And I believe everyone benefits from this, both those who invest and those who receive these investments, because new production facilities will be created, which will give a return and a return on the investment received. To do this, we need to create tools that would not be subject to external risks and, above all, political considerations. I think it is quite possible to do this. This is the way we will go. Thank you. This is a very important question. Let's also ask the final question for today. I would like to give the BBC. A rare guest in our time is Steve Rosenberg. The BBC is in a hat like that, isn't it? I have read the final declaration, and it speaks of the need for global and regional stability and security, and a just peace. And, in general, the motto of the Russian BRICS presidency includes, in my opinion, such concepts of justice and security. But how does all this relate to your actions over the past 2.5 years, with the invasion of Russian troops in Ukraine? That's where justice, stability, and security are, including the security of Russia, because before the start of the spell, there were no drone attacks on Russian territory, no shelling of Russian cities, or foreign troops occupying Russian territory. It didn't happen. And finally, how does all this relate to the recent statement by British intelligence that Russia has set itself the goal of wreaking havoc on the streets of Britain and Europe with arson, sabotage, and so on? That's where the stability is. Thank you. Yes. So I will start with Russia's security, because for me this is the most important thing. You said about drone strikes and so on. Yes, it didn't happen. But there was a much worse situation. The situation was that our constant and persistent offers to establish contacts and relations with the countries of the Western world were constantly pointed out to us in their place. I can tell you that quite definitely. So everything seems to be affectionate, but in principle, we were always shown our place. It means that this place, too, would eventually lead us to the descent of Russia into the category of secondary states that perform the exclusive function of raw materials appendages with the loss to a certain extent, and to a large extent, of the country's sovereignty. And Russia in this capacity not only develops, it cannot exist. Russia cannot exist if it loses its sovereignty. That's the most important thing. And Russia's exit from this state, strengthening its sovereignty, independence in the economy, finance, and military affairs, means increasing our security. And it means creating conditions for its confident development in the future as an independent state, full-fledged and self-sufficient. With the partners we have in BRICS, who respect Russia's independence, respect our traditions, and whom we treat in the same way. Now about justice in the field of development and security. Yes, right. Yes. Look, I have certain considerations on this score. I will try to answer you. That's what my thoughts are. What is development equity? Look at the recent events during the coronavirus pandemic. What was going on at that time? I want to draw your attention to this, and the attention of all other representatives of the media. At that time, the United States had an issue of about $6 trillion, and in the Eurozone, they showed an issue of about $3 trillion, a little over 3. And all these funds were thrown on the world market, buying everything in a row, first of all food, and not only that, both medicines and vaccines, which are now being destroyed on a massive scale, because they have already expired. So they threw it all away, and food inflation started. Inflation has gone up all over the world. What have the world's leading economies done? They have abused their exclusive position in global finance, both dollars and euros. They printed and swept away the most necessary goods from the market like a vacuum cleaner. They consume more, you consume more than you produce and earn. Is that fair? We believe not, and we want to change this situation. This is what we are doing in BRICS. Now about from the point of view of security in general. As for Russia's security, I have already said. I understand what you're talking about. But is it fair from the point of view of security to ignore our constant appeals to partners for years, not to expand NATO to the east? Is it fair to lie to our face, promising that there will be no such expansion, and violating the obligations assumed to do so? Is it fair to get to us here in the underbelly, let's say, in the same Ukraine, and start building there? Not to prepare, but to build military bases already. Is that fair? And it is fair to carry out a coup d'état, which I spoke about, answering your colleagues' questions, spitting on international law, and all the principles of international law, and the UN Charter, financing a coup in another country, in this case in Ukraine, and pushing the situation towards its development in the direction of a hot phase. Is this fair from the point of view of global security? And is it fair to violate the commitments undertaken within the OSCE when all Western countries have signed a paper, according to which there can be no security of one country if the security of another is violated? We told you not to do this. It violates our security, the expansion of NATO. No, they did it anyway. Is that fair? There is no justice here. And we want to change this situation. And we will achieve this. Sorry again. The claim of British intelligence that Russia is the color of chaos on the streets. Listen to me. Thank you for reminding me about this part. But this is complete nonsense. You understand that what is happening on the streets of some European cities is the result of the internal politics of these states. But you and I know, as I have already said, well, the European economy is balancing on the brink of recession. And the leading economies of the Eurozone are not actually in recession. Even if there is some small growth, zero as much as 0.5% due to the South, where there is no such serious production. This is due to real estate, the tourism industry, and so on. But are we to blame for this? What's that got to do with us? Western countries have taken European countries and abandoned our energy carriers. But we don't refuse. By the way, there is still one thread along the bottom of the Baltic Sea, Nord Stream 2. Well, what is it worth to the German authorities? Just press the button and everything went. But they don't do it for political reasons, and their most important partner, I don't know for what reasons, is the conditions when entire sectors of the German economy move to the United States. Because the authorities there create more complementary conditions for business. And the primary energy carrier there is 3 times, in my opinion, cheaper than in Europe, or even 4 times. Other taxation conditions, targeted actions. But what does this have to do with us? It means that this causes an appropriate reaction, because there is a decrease in people's living standards. This is obvious. These are the statistics of the European countries themselves. But what does this have to do with us? Well, you're right. Unless, you know, in our country, as they say, this is an attempt to shift from a sick head to a healthy one, and get away from responsibility for wrong decisions in the economic sphere and in the sphere of domestic policy. In the economic sphere, look here, but now it seems to me, this is an obvious thing for objective experts. But after all, many in Europe, and in other countries, and in the States have abused, and are still trying to abuse, the agenda. The environmental agenda, and the increase in temperature on the planet. But they are getting ahead of themselves, not having sufficient grounds from the point of view of technology development. They are closing everything related to nuclear energy there. They are closing everything related to coal generation. It used to be, right? They close everything related to hydrocarbons in general. And someone counted, here is Africa. Will it be able to do without these types of hydrocarbons or not? No, they are being imposed on them, on African countries, and some other emerging market countries, they are being imposed on modern, and perhaps effective, tools and technologies from the point of view of preserving the environment. But they can't buy them, there is no money, but give them money then. And no one gives money. But on the other hand, they are screwing up tools. I believe that these are tools of neocolonialism, when they lower these countries, and force them to depend on Western technologies and loans again. Loans are given on terrible terms. Loans cannot be returned. This is another tool of neocolonialism. Therefore, it is necessary first of all to look at the results of the policies of Western countries in the field of economics, finance and domestic policy. And people, of course, are afraid of the aggravation of the international situation, related to the escalation in various conflict zones in the Middle East and Ukraine. But we are not dealing with this escalation. Aggravation is always played by those who are on the other side. Well, we are ready for this escalation. Think about whether those countries are ready to do this. Vladimirovich, we still literally have a couple of minutes. A couple of minutes. If I may, finally, the Russian media, and the Russian media from Tatarstan. Yes, let's take a second. We'll do this, according to sectors. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Let's start with the left sector here. Give it to the girls. Let's give the girls the floor. Yes, please. Yes.
Arish Mohammed, correspondent of the Moscow Bureau of Skyzarabi, Arab Emirates. Vladimir Vladimirovich, please tell me, there are a number of reports that say that Moscow can support Iran in the event of an Israeli attack. How do you feel about such messages? Do they reflect the essence of things? Maybe, is Russia considering assistance at all at this round of escalation in the region? Thank you.
I believe that, first of all, we are very concerned about what is happening in the region. And no matter what anyone says, Russia is not interested in the conflict getting worse. Strategically, we will gain nothing from this. We will only see additional problems. As for helping Iran, I believe that we are. Yes, first of all, we are in contact with the Iranian leadership, of course, in close contact. And we see our role in creating conditions for the settlement of the situation and, above all, in the search for mutual compromises. It seems to me that this is possible. No one is really in the region, and my conversations now on the sidelines of the BRICS summit show that no one in the region wants an expansion of the conflict and some kind of big war. Nobody. Come here, please. Yes, please, that's right. This is Kyrgyzstan, as far as I understand. Dear Vladimir Vladimirovich, I am Tursun. I came from Kyrgyzstan, chairman of the Human Rights Guild of Kyrgyzstan, coordinator of the Congress of the Central Asian Countries Representatives. I represent the public of Central Asian countries, not only in Kyrgyzstan. First of all, I would like to congratulate you on holding the prize summit at a high level. Thank you. I, like other people of the globe, do not envy you that being the president of the Russian Federation. This is the heaviest burden, but no matter how hard it is, it will be borne with honor. The West has wanted to distance itself from the rest of the world for about 3 years, but today, this goal has ended in a complete fiasco for them. This is confirmed by the results of the BRICS summit, where about 35 countries of the world supported your political and state position. And I came to this summit of the general parties, and then Antonio Guterres and other international organizations. Today, historical events have taken place on Russian soil in the city of Kazan, where the multipolar world has already taken over. The unipolar world led by the United States is gradually losing its importance, losing its position. At the meeting of the leaders of the BRICS Plus format, they will discuss complex issues of the Middle East. Despite the revolution, Israel does not obey in any way, openly ignores the undecision, and even declared the Secretary General a personal grata. Then Iran delivered a massive blow to Israel. And now Israel announces that, according to open data, Iran's actions are being prepared to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. I have questions and suggestions. There were US forces holding in the Persian Gulf to help Israel. Therefore, the BRICS member states under Chairman Marsha should prevent the unilateral domination of Israel by the United States. and give a decent response to their actions if they start a war against other states. Not only us warships should be on duty over the coast of the Persian Gulf. At the same time, Russian and other ships of the BRICS member states are holding to help Iran, Palestine, Lebanon. Only in this case, the arbitrariness of the United States and Israel will be stopped. And the second question, dear Vladimir Vladimirovich. Soy. The United States of America and the West is one-sided, deceives, warns you, that Russian President Putin refuses to negotiate. But before Zelensky's Swiss summit, you announced your demands, your conditions, but they did not agree. Have your requirements also remained the same as before? I don't think you refuse to negotiate, do you? This is the second question. And the third question, tell me about the activity. You know, let's show respect to others. Thank you very much. That's it, thanks. Yes, a colleague has just asked about our relations with Iran, readiness to provide assistance, and so on. The first one concerns the situation in the Middle East. I spoke today, and I want to repeat it here. I think there is no person on earth whose heart does not bleed when he looks at what is happening in Gaza. But more than 40,000 people died, mostly women and children. Therefore, here our assessment is known, given. How to get out of the situation. We are also talking about this. This can only be on ways to eliminate the causes. And the main reason is the absence of a full-fledged state of Palestine. We need to implement all the decisions of the Security Council in this area. But we must work with all participants in the process, not to allow the conflict to grow or worsen in any case. In particular, we need to work with Israel, which, admittedly, still faced a terrorist act in October last year. Therefore, it is necessary to analyze the situation very calmly, carefully, and in no case condone a disproportionate response to these terrorist acts, but work with everyone and achieve a reduction in the level of confrontation, including on the Lebanese track. It seems to me that in general, this is possible, but we need to act very carefully. And I'm just, frankly, afraid to say an extra word, because every sloppy word can damage this process. In general, I want to thank you for bringing up this topic, because it is extremely important. As for negotiations with Ukraine, I have already said this many times, we are grateful to the President of Turkey, Mr. Tayyip Recep Erdogan, who once provided us with a platform for negotiations with the Ukrainian delegation. In the course of this negotiation process, at the end of 2022 year, we came up with a possible document, a draft peace agreement. The Ukrainian delegation initialed it, which means that it was satisfied with everything. And then suddenly she refused. Recently, the Turkish side again, directly the minister, an assistant to Mr. Erdogan, called directly from New York, and said that there were new proposals that were being asked to be considered for negotiations. I agreed, I said okay, we agree. The next day, the head of the Kiev regime suddenly announced that he was not going to negotiate with us. But we told the Turks, guys, thank you of course for your participation, but first you will deal with your customers then. Whether they want to or not, let them say it directly. Well, as far as we know, it was not a peace proposal that was made in Parliament again. But some kind of another plan for a victory plan was made. Well, all right. As for the victory, last year, when trying to conduct so-called counteroffensive operations, the losses, in my opinion, amounted to about 16,000 people. These are sanitary and irrevocable. Now only in the last month or so in the Kursk direction. I think there are 18 already there. That's 26,000 losses. 26,000. Also sanitary and irrevocable. And the technicians lost last year during the counteroffensive, in my opinion, I'm afraid to lie that this is 18,000 vehicles. Now it's almost 1,000 more. However, we lost fewer tanks, almost 100. But it seems to me they simply used less because there were simply fewer of them in the Ukrainian army. But it would be better than naming such figures. It would be better, of course, based on the realities and based on what is happening on Earth, to sit down at the negotiating table and conduct these negotiations. But the leaders of the Kiev regime do not want them, including I will change my mind. And because the beginning of peace negotiations would lead to the need to lift martial law, and immediately after that, it is necessary to hold presidential elections. Apparently, they are not ready yet. The ball is on their side. So, come here, please. Yes, please. Good evening. Good evening. Tell me, what are you willing to do to end the war in Ukraine? Well, what are you not ready for? Thank you. And I have just said that we are ready to consider any options for peace agreements based on the realities that are taking shape on Earth. And we are not ready for anything else. Please. Well, please, please, yes. Yes, please, please. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Saudi Arabia is the center of the Russian army. I ask you to ask my question in Arabic. If the BRICS group has probably already overcome the stage when it was called a platform. And now can it be called centralized management?
We don't have Arabic translation. I'm awfully sorry for that. No, we don't have Arabic translation right now.
Yes.
Идет перевод? I beg your pardon.
I think that the current stage of BRICS already needs some kind of centralized management or body, in order to become a kind of center for managing contacts around the world. And, for example, the country that chairs the BRIC today, tomorrow it may be replaced by another country that may be less effective, or will approach it. And the second point is connected with the fact that Russia would like to create such a mechanism for interaction with its partners. Can the central bank, or a new bank that has been created, interact with other banks and in other countries with similar banks? And so now we need to create funds that are related to mutual investments. And the last question. Have you considered the issue of Saudi Arabia joining the BRICS? Thank you. Well, first of all, as for the organizational work within the framework of BRICS, yes, of course, it is now an organization. This is an obvious fact. And you are absolutely right that organizations need to be structured. And of course, my colleagues and I will think about it, and are doing it. But in general, each of the participating countries is self-sufficient and sincerely, I want to emphasize it, sincerely strives to develop and strengthen this union. Therefore, I don't think there will be any failure in the work of the BRICS. I don't see it. But at the same time, we would not like to overly bureaucratize the work of this organization, so that we have officials there who will drive luxury cars, have some kind of endless staff, large salaries, and then it is not clear at all who is doing what there. But you are right that it is necessary, of course, to structure this work and think about it. As for the bank, I have already said, we have a bank, a new development bank. It is still small. He has financed 100 projects totaling somewhere between $32 and $33 billion. But with regard to the investment process, this is a very important thing. And for countries such as Saudi Arabia, Russia, and other countries China, India. It is very important to be able to invest reliably and safely in rapidly developing markets. This is an extremely important thing. This is our proposal to create this new investment platform. As for Saudi Arabia, yes, of course, we are in very good contact with our friend, the Crown Prince. We have a wonderful relationship with the custodians of the two shrines, with the King of Saudi Arabia. Representatives of Saudi Arabia took part in our joint work today, and we hope that it will only expand further. I don't see it here. Please, now this sector, please. It is necessary, please, girl. Yes, yes, please, please, here. Yes, that's what you have drawn there, I don't see.
In Portuguese, if possible. If possible, my name is Bianca. I am a correspondent for Globa News, and Globa is the main television network in Brazil. The question about Venezuela. Yesterday, you thanked President Nicolás Maduro for all his efforts, including for his participation in BRICS. But Brazil is against it. And I would like to know which side Russia is on, and whether Venezuela can enter the BRICS, even against the will of Brazil. And the question about Ukraine. You also thanked Brazil and China for their efforts in resolving the political conflict. In the political way of resolving the conflict in Ukraine, I would like to ask from 1 to 10, what chances do you see? The chances that this peace plan will be successful in Ukraine, and what is absolutely unacceptable for you, from your point of view.
First, as for the chances. You know, it's difficult for me. I think it's even inappropriate to name some numbers and scores from 1 to 10. You know, this is also why I don't want to sound rude. But here is the fact of attempts to start negotiations. And then the refusal of these attempts. Well, I told you that the High Representative of Turkey called us directly from New York. And before that it was the same. Before that, Turkey also took the initiative on the situation in the Black Sea. To ensure that freedom of navigation is safe. To talk and conclude certain agreements and agreements on the safety of nuclear power facilities, and we agreed. And then the head of the Kiev regime publicly declared no negotiations. We also told our Turkish friends, well, listen, you'll figure it out there. You offer us with a link to them. We agree, and then we hear the same refusal a day later. Well, what do you mean? They spread their hands like that. Well, so these are the difficult partners. Why do I say it is very difficult to evaluate in points from 1 to 10? The behavior of the Ukrainian elite today is very irrational. Believe me, I'm talking about what I know. I'm not going to give any other estimates right now. For example, I believe that even their provocations there in the Kursk direction are connected with attempts to interfere in the domestic political situation and the electoral process in the United States. They want at all costs to show the current administration and the voters of the current administration of this party that their investments in Ukraine were not in vain, at all costs and at any cost, including the cost of the lives of their soldiers. They work for them, not for the interests of the Ukrainian people. Therefore, somehow it is very difficult to evaluate in some points. It is almost impossible. So, now about Brazil. Brazil's assessment of what is happening in Venezuela. We know these estimates. Our position does not coincide with Brazil on Venezuela. I am talking about this openly. We talked about it on the phone the day before yesterday with the President of Brazil, with whom I have very good, I believe, friendly relations. Venezuela is fighting for its independence, for its sovereignty. Once, I remember, the leader of the opposition, after the previous elections, went to the square, raised his eyes to the sky, and said that he was before the Lord, considering himself the president. Funny. And then we discussed this situation with the leadership of the United States. But they supported and still support the opposition, but modestly kept silent, grinned, and that's it. It's clear that this is ridiculous, right? Anyone can look into the eyes of the sky, raise and declare himself to be anyone, including the Pope. But it also doesn't happen. It shouldn't be like that. There are certain procedures of an electoral nature. Go to the polls and win. We believe that President Maduro won the elections, won fairly, he formed a government, and we wish success to his government and the Venezuelan people. But I very much hope that Brazil and Venezuela will sort out their bilateral relations during the bilateral discussion. I know President Lulu as a very decent, honest person, and I am sure that he will approach this situation from such positions. From the position of an objective character. And he asked me to convey some words to the President of Venezuela during our telephone conversation. I hope that the situation will level out. As for the admission of Venezuela or any other state to the BRICS, I want to say that this is possible only with consensus. We have rules under which, in order to accept any candidate to this organization, to the BRICS Association, the consent of all participants of this association is required. Without this, it is impossible to make such a step. Please don't be angry, but my colleagues are waiting for me. They're at a bilateral meeting. In general, I have a very difficult choice between debating with you and going there. Please excuse me, don't be angry with me. Thank you very much.